With the current government shutdown, Foodstamps, EBT, SNAP benefits are about to run out. Let's take a really quick look at what that means and a different approach I suggested in 1985.
Hi, and welcome to Yeti at Large. This is a channel focused on making the most out of what you have, no matter where you're at. Thanks for tuning in and helping out.
With the government shutdown now running into its second month, there's been a lot of discussion about SNAP and EBT benefits running out. There's been some real colorful language and examples of people sharing their opinions on what they think about SNAP, both positive, negative, and the outlandish. Let's have a different, very brief conversation from a more historical perspective and using some honest language. I've made no secret of the fact I don't care for soft language. If you've watched any of our videos, you'll know I like to call things what they are. SNAP and EBT is a way of disguising this program and softening it and making it more palatable. This is food stamps. These are welfare. I'm more reminiscent of George Carlin talking about shell shock instead of post-traumatic stress disorder. Those are fun videos. You ought to look him up and see some of his examples of that. The other thing we're not going to do today is we're not going to talk about waste, fraud, and abuse. Those are inflammatory words that are instantly going to incite a polarization on either side of this object. Instead, I'm going to use the phrase inefficiencies. Are we getting the most value for the dollar spent? Anybody knows any government program out there is horribly inefficient, especially compared to the private sector. But when the private sector and the government are both driving towards the same thing, you're really going to compound those inefficiencies. Not for the large food companies, but for John Q. taxpayer and the general public who needs this benefit. And that's another thing. Food stamps are a benefit. They're beneficial. They're above and beyond the basics. Who should this go to? Is there a demonstrated need? Is it being used properly month over month? A lot of people make a strong rationale that this program should be exclusively reserved for citizens, and anyone who is here without proper documentation and citizenship should be eligible to receive some basic benefits on a very limited basis while they're working out their citizenship issues, but that's a video for another day. Full disclosure, not only do I have skin in the game with loved ones and family members being affected by the government shutdown today, I have used food stamps in the past. See, I'm a cook, I'm a baker, I worked with my hands, and years ago, I nearly took this finger off with a meat cleaver. It was hanging by a thread. The doctor reattached it, and months of therapy and infections, I was out of work for a long time. I relied on unemployment, food stamps, and access. That's Arizona's version of healthcare. That being said, I did it in a very limited manner. When I was back on my feet, I got off of those programs. I even tried to return money left on my food stamps card. They wouldn't accept it. They told me to spend it. I said, I want to give it back. I don't need it. They said there's no method to do that. So I used it up. I put food in my pantry and then I donated most of it. We'll talk about that in a moment. One of the things I did one of the things I did was I padded my food stamps with about a month's extra money just in case something would happen. Like, I don't know, a government shutdown. Now, I did it in good faith and with good measure. I reserved some money so that I had a little bit of a cushion should something happen. But you watch the news today and talk to grocery store clerks. It is not uncommon for them to talk about seeing people with benefit balances on the bottom of their receipt running into the tens of thousands of dollars. A balance. How many Americans do you know have that much money in their checking account, let alone have that much surplus money on their food stamp program? I have no problem with the balance running 1 month of benefits in excess, but somebody might argue that it should never go higher than that, and if you don't use it, you lose it. All told, in Arizona, I've paid into our public benefit system over 500 months of my life. I used it for a handful of months, but I have paid back and paid forward 10 times anything I've used. Additionally, I developed the habit of volunteering while I was on those programs. I volunteered at the food bank, what little I could do one-handed. Since then, I volunteered with youth sports, Civil Air Patrol, local community events, and I've donated blood over 120 times. I recommend you do the same where you're able. It's easy to become upset and perplexed when you see the spending habits of people who are using these benefits today, eating in a more luxurious and gluttonous manner than you and I eat on. Now back to that padding your benefits and the rainy day fund. I kept quite a pantry during the pandemic. I had enough food to feed way too many people for way too long, but I'm a cook. That was a way I combated the uncertainty of the pandemic and provided for my community. The irony is, I probably gave away 90% of what was in that pantry to people in need over the years, especially as stuff became aged. But my pantry was stocked with stuff that I could give away. Keith, my maintenance man at the resort, was talking to me about winterizing our water supply for the RV. He's getting ready to do some work, and we are going to as well, so I appreciate the heads up. That's what we're talking about with community, working for each other, helping each other. I have a garden right outside my window here. I'm growing tomatoes, serrano peppers, basil. I had squash earlier and beans and okra. A little bit later, I'm going to plant some cabbage, broccoli, and cauliflower because they're more of a cold weather plant. Hopefully we get some results out of that. Look, obviously with any food stamp program, there's no smoke, no alcohol. We get that. But all the processed foods and the junk food, air quotes, that's got to go too. It's got to be highly, highly limited. So that's why in a food stamp program, you design it so that there's benefit in categories. You can spend so much in this category, so much in that one. We'll talk in a second about those categories that I suggested in 1985, back when I was in culinary school. My program that I came up with respected the fact that food stamps used to look like Monopoly money. There were all these different colors, but they were color-coded based on the value. I suggested color-coding them based on the category. Back then, it would have been quite a bit of work to separate that out manually with old push-button registers, S&H green stamps. Today, that'd be a no-brainer. You could code that into the UPC symbol, and the computer could automatically qualify which purchases are available in which category. Not hard to do. Now, I know it's inherently inefficient, and that goes against what I'm saying, but part of me thinks that you should have paper food stamps, not a card. You should be making these transactions in person. You should have a valid mailing address and receive those paper food stamps. Now, the computer can obviously do this through a card, and that's almost guaranteed how the program would go, but back in the day, that was my suggestion. The nice thing is, you should be able to see your balances on the bottom of your receipt by category. There's enough bandwidth in the software to do that, no problem. And these grocery stores, these food retailers, these manufacturers, they love that EBT money, so they're going to run the pads off their paws to make sure they're maximizing their revenue from that. They know that EBT spenders do a horrible job of how they purchase based on economics, economies of scale. That's why I strongly believe that any food stamp program needs to have coaching and training as a byproduct with that. I volunteer. I'll give my time to provide coaching and training to people. I know there's 1,000 other cooks in every state and city that are willing to do the same. They need to understand when you're purchasing, there's such a thing as the cost per ounce. That's the real cost of a product. Now, I can buy potatoes in 27 different forms in the grocery store, but you're never going to find a better cost per ounce than this thing. And the thing is, if I spend $1 on potatoes, there's going to be shrink. Remember that word from earlier? And I'm only going to get 80 cents worth of potatoes, so 20 cents are going to go in the trash no matter what I do. You know, it's interesting, you'll hear a lot of big politicians talk about economic activity referring to food stamps. What they're talking about is a shell game. If I have $1 to buy a potato and that dollar changes hands 4 times, they'll say $4 worth of economic activity. But in reality, I've taken your dollar, the taxpayer, given it to me, and I've shrunk it from $1 to 80 cents if I'm super efficient with this. A frozen processed potato, I'm taking your dollar and turning it into a quarter. Look at the math. So in 1985, I looked at the monopoly money that was food stamps, and I suggested color coding it based on the categories of the food. Back then, the food pyramid was king, and we all knew a balanced diet and a portion of your plate went to each of those categories. My diet, just like a lot of your diet, starts in the produce section. 90% of what we're going to do in food stamps is around the perimeter of the store, not in those middle aisles. Typically, that's where you can lose your money, but not a guarantee, and we'll talk more about that down below. The first color is green. Green is whole, single item produce, not prepared salsa, but tomatoes, onions, peppers, whole produce. That should be the largest portion of your dollar in food stamps. Now, I'm not a vegetarian, but I eat produce in a larger portion than I do anything else. That takes us to brown. And the interesting thing is, you might want to call a potato or rice produce, but it's not, it's a starch. This is where brown lives. Potatoes, rice, dried pasta, and bread. Not processed snack cakes like you find in the middle aisles. Basic single source bread. And in my world, that includes tortillas and English muffins. From brown, we go to red. Those are limited, whole cuts of meat. They can be frozen or fresh. We can categorize them like that. But that's chicken breast, chicken thighs, whole chickens, turkey pieces. That's ground beef or basic roasts. That's pork. That's super basic stuff. It is not New York steaks, scallops, and lobster. Then we go to white, and that's again limited dairy, single items. Choose whatever milk you want, cottage cheese, yogurt, butter, whole chunks of cheese. Again, efficiencies. That shredded cheese cost per ounce can be a lot more expensive than just a whole block of cheese. Blue, that's where your frozen items come in without the overlap. You can get some single source frozen items. You can even buy that ice cream if you wanted to. But that category has a very limited amount of dollars in it, so it's only going to represent a small portion of your total food spending. Current EBT SNAP benefits just give you $1. You could go in and buy nothing but ice cream if you wanted right now. That is incorrect, that is wrong, that is damaging the people who receive those benefits, and it's not fair to the taxpayer. Pink, those are those shelf-stable items. Now, as a cook in my mind, I'm thinking sugar, flour, oil, vinegar, salt, pepper, spices, corn husks for my tamales. But those are the shelf-stable items. If you want to buy canned corn, you can. Single item. Keeping it simple. And again, this would be easy to program. And it's only a portion of your total spending dollar for the month. It can run out quickly if you overspend in that category. And then that brings us to gold. Gold are those freebie luxury items. You can spend it in any category you want. For me, today, that would represent that pack of cinnamon gum I wanted to buy. It's not nutritional. There's no value in my diet. I'm not going to not starve if I don't have my cinnamon gum. A little bit of life's luxuries do make you feel like a human. The point is, and again, in the current food stamp programs, I could go in and buy 75 cases of cinnamon gum and resell them if I wanted to, not the 1 or 2 packs utilizing my precious gold food stamps for those luxury items that I want. So that was my monopoly money concept in 1985. I got called some dirty names suggesting I was dehumanizing and being mean to people. Having lived on food stamps for a short time in my life, I realized it wasn't dehumanizing. What was dehumanizing was not being able to stand on my own 2 feet and needing help. That hurt me, and I've done everything I can to ensure I didn't take more than I gave. Ultimately, though, at the end of the day, there are no processed foods, no junk food, no soda, no candy, outside of those limited gold dollars, and they're very limited. You gotta understand, and this is me on a soapbox, the Ritz crackers that I was eating in 1985 are not the Ritz crackers you're seeing today. Compare those labels, they're available on the internet. The amount of additives, processed food, and horrible, indigestible garbage that is showing up in these highly refined, highly processed foods has got to go. Now, you think what you want about Maha and Robert Kennedy. I think he's on to an absolutely important, beneficial concept. But I have been saying since 1985, your diet should not consist of highly refined starches, highly processed sweeteners, including artificial and real, highly processed salts, and that includes things like monosodium glutamate, and food coloring. Those 4 things have no business being in your diet. About 5 years ago, I expanded that to say that also those highly refined seed oils are horrible for you. I cook with olive oil and coconut oil and avocado oil. I have for decades. Those are my favorite oils. Actually, rice bran oil is my favorite, but it's horribly expensive. Why I love it is it doesn't scorch. It has a heat point in the 400s. Anyway, enough of my soapbox about food stamps. I'm going to make some potato pancakes faster than you could microwave Ore-Ida tater tots. Thank you so much for joining us. Yeti at large.